This is TWiT.
So, Apple event. I was there. Last week I left everybody. I know it was a huge cliffhanger. Will Jason get into the Apple event? And then literally like 40 minutes later, I got an email saying, yeah, you can come to the Apple event. So that was really exciting for a week there, I guess. But yes, I got to go. What a relief. I got to watch the same video you watched, but I did get to see Tim Cook introduce it from the stage of the Steve Jobs Theater. He said good morning like 10 times. Expressed his excitement and then played a video for us. But I did get to spend some time in the hands-on area. So I will. I was able to pick the brain of some people at Apple. We'll throw that in as we go. Just some of the stuff that I got to see and touch and ask about. But we should start with the new iPhones because that's what everybody's talking about. And I know I said this last week, but I'm going to say it again. The crowd for an Apple event is one thing, and then there's the crowd for the iPhone event. And the reaction to Apple events is one thing, and then there's the reaction to the iPhone event. This is the event that the world pays attention to, and it's evident from who was at the theater. It's people from all over the world, broadcast journalists, influencers, all sorts of people. It's a very different crowd. The usual crowd, we're like on the outside. We're like the kids with their backs against the wall at the school dance, and then all the really popular people are there in the middle. But we did get to get our hands on them. The iPhone, because the world cares about the iPhone. It's one of the most important consumer products out there. So we got iPhone 16, two models, the 16 and the 16 Plus, and then the 16 Pro and Pro Max, just iterations on last year's sizes and models. And, you know, we can go into it. There's a lot to dig into here. Upgraded cameras across the board, a new button for photography, a dedicated button. This is interesting. Last year, Mark Gurman did a bunch of reports about a button that they were going to bring to the iPhone, and then they had problems and they couldn't bring it in, and they replaced it with the action button. I wonder if this is that other button that they were trying to do last year, but it's a real button dedicated. It is called the Camera Control. And it is a dedicated physical hardware button that allows you to launch the camera app and take pictures and control the camera app by doing a soft press or a swipe. But the hard press down to the click is what you'd expect. It takes a picture, or if you hold it down, it takes a video.
That's what really impressed me about this. It would be nice enough to have a dedicated camera button. It would be a little bit nicer to have one that lets you do focus lock, then recompose, and then click the shutter. The fact that they've really made this into almost a three-dimensional button device, where it's not only sensing depth but also like back and forth, like a touch device. And at least in the videos that they had in the demonstration, the ability to do things like zoom without having to like shift your grip to tap something on the screen, the ability to recompose and do things like that, that seems like it could go from being a power feature for people who are interested in real photography to people who just don't want to drop their phones because they're fumbling with the interface. I'm really impressed with that.
Yeah, it's I got a chance to use it, and what I would say is that it takes a little getting used to, especially this idea that you're kind of like squeezing it part way down. But if you've shot with a point and shoot or a DSLR, you've had that experience already. It becomes very familiar, and it's complex as you want it to be, right? If you want it to be more complex, you can do a double squeeze, and it basically gives you a menu of items that you can choose, and you swipe to choose an item, and then that becomes the control that you swipe and then press to shoot. So if it matters to you, you know, if focus matters to you, or portrait mode matters to you, or whatever it is that you want to set up, photographic styles, which we'll need to talk about because they completely overhauled that as well. You can set whatever you want to be the thing that happens when you swipe back and forth. It's sort of up to you. And when I tried to describe it yesterday, and I feel like, just like yesterday, it sounds really complicated. It's a lot easier when you look at it, but I think the beauty of it is it's only as complicated as you want it to be. If you wanted to keep it simple, you can just keep it simple, and it will be I think that's the beauty of it, is building a muscle memory of like I can put it down halfway, and then I've got the shot I want, and then I can press it all the way and click and take a picture.
I think that gripability is such a big deal because we've had camera shortcuts of various kinds forever. We had the action button last year. We have the push the button on the lock screen. We have, of course, the camera app. But this is just so simple and straightforward. And as you say, it can be as complicated as you want to in terms of how you take the picture. But if I just really quick want to get a shot, and especially if I have my iPhone in a case with a cover on it, which is just me, and I'm dumb, and I just choose cases that have stuff that gets in the way, but that's my choice. But this way, I can grip it with one hand, and I can take that picture or those many pictures so that one of the pictures that I take will actually be the exact one I want.
Yeah, it's always fun to see the flurry of like last minute stories that come in like on the day before and the weekend before. And there are a lot of stories about, oh, someone has a brand new iPhone case that doesn't seem to have room for the new button that now we all know is going to happen. So I think we talked about this a little bit last week that, yeah, if you can hold off on like buying a case, a third party case, for, at least for like a couple of months, that's probably going to be for the best.
Especially this time because it's a touch sensitive capacitive button, and they're actually putting another button on the case that will channel your capacitive electricity on your finger through that button to the button down below, and like that is going to be harder to knock off. I have faith that they'll knock it off, but it makes it harder. I wonder if that's a little interesting. I'm sure it's not a motivation, but I'm sure somewhere within Apple, they're like, oh, what if we made a button so complicated it would be harder to make a third-party case? And more people would buy our cases.
And we'll have a new excuse for making this harder to repair without pissing off the wrong people. So you've had the chance to actually like press it. Is there like can you feel like a haptic response when you are pressing it, kind of like the Magic Trackpad and stuff like that?
So it's a little bit of both. When you do the little half squeeze, it's not actually, really depressing as much as it is giving you a little haptic. There's haptic on all of that. But when you press it down, it depresses, and it's got a kind of a delightful little kind of like pop button feeling when you press it down. You can't miss it when you do that shutter button. I don't know what all the secret sauce is in there. I don't know if they're firing haptics while it depresses. Right? Like, because what the Magic Trackpads taught us is that you can fake a lot of stuff with haptics, and you think your finger moved. Your finger moved, but it moved because the device shook, not because you actually depressed something. But there is a physical depress that happens, but there's also probably a lot of magic that's happening. That's
something that Apple does really well. Haptics is one of their unspoken secret sauces. The way that they introduced in the first Apple Watch, the way that it's not just a buzz, it can actually like do like a bug is sort of crawling across your wrist, and the way that they did it with the Magic Trackpad. Like I remember getting my briefing and talking to an engineer, and I had to sometimes, like I'm sure the people who are in this conversation will understand this. There are times where like my readers and listeners don't get to see the questions that I ask, so I can ask really dumb questions to make sure I understand something. And I remember just asking, so there's nothing mechanical here? No. So, meaning that when I feel like it's pressing down and clicking, nothing is pressing down and clicking? No. Okay, so if this device is absolutely dead, turned off, no power, and I were to press into this, I would feel nothing. And because it was just so unbelievable. And so I'm really looking forward to see how they would apply that to this button.
Nothing more creepy than touching a Magic Trackpad that is off.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it does nothing. It's like a dead fish. You're like, ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. Micah, what do you think about this one?
I was a little nervous about the button being complicated. I'm glad to hear what you said about the simplicity being there, and then you could make it more, because I was thinking about if I was the photo subject and I saw someone holding up their iPhone. I'm so used to, they hold up their phone, you wait a second, and then it's done, to seeing someone holding up their phone, and then whoop, 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 swipe it around.
Right.
Hold on, I've got to bloop, 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 bloop. And it's like, what is happening here? Are you suddenly a professional photographer that I've hired to, take my headshots? I was not expecting that. So it's good to hear that you kind of can avoid all of that extra stuff, because I just think for me, it might get in the way.
Think about, I have used through my life SLR cameras a bit and some point and shoot cameras. And what I learned with SLR especially is like you can have it in the like green mode where literally everything is auto and you go halfway down to focus and all the way down to shoot. You can also put it in, shutter priority, aperture priority, and there's a little wheel behind it. I remember when I was reading about it and I was discovering it and I was like, oh, what does this wheel do? And it turns out that in auto mode, it does nothing. But there are all those other modes. I feel like that's sort of what they're going for here is the swipe things are there and the double squeeze to get up and like find another thing to go down into to use that as the swipe. It's all there for the people who care, right? Yeah. But you don't need to know it ideally, right? Because that would make it impossible.
But also they're making the camera more camera-like. Like I did not bring this as an intentional prop. I'm just like in the habit now of carrying my camera around because I'm walking 2 miles to get to the library back, and sometimes you see birds and stuff. But yeah, I mean, what I like about using this, normally it doesn't have such a ridiculously long lens on it, but even like with a iPhone style lens on it, what I like about walking around with it is that all I got to do is just like hold it and press this button. I don't really have to look down and find where the button is. And it has these two like rollers to set. I've got it set on manual usually. So here's how I here's how I change the shutter speed. Here's how I change the aperture, and it will do like the ISO automatically. And so this is all stuff that you do tactilely. And all I'm doing is I'm looking at the picture. I'm not looking at the interface. So the more they can do about that to make this really complicated supercomputer of computational photography feel like the Instamatic that maybe you had when you were like 8 years old, the better. And we're not talking about the Apple Watch yet, but for foreshadowing, I thought that a lot of the most impressive things about the Apple Watch 10 were just about let's make this act more like how people expect a watch to act. And this is the sort of fine point that Apple is so good at with their hardware.
Yeah, this button. Well, I mean, we'll see how it goes, but the physical having muscle memory, being able to just kind of go do is great. They have some other little tricks in there where I think there's like a hold at which point you can get the interface to drop away, so all you see temporarily is the content because you're not in that. Well, I'm using a computer, right? Like instead, you're just really focused on taking a picture. And in good news, and I think that given how much we've talked about this on the show, Andy, you would have recognized this too. Out of the gate, this button has an app API so that a maker of a third-party camera app, and it's going to be limited to camera apps, third-party camera apps can also build on this same button and build their own menus. And they even in the demo showed kind of wild Snapchat where you're actually swiping to say which friend of yours is going to get that picture that you're taking. Like, so that's, when we talk about Apple having issues in the EU, especially, and not dealing with competitors and not opening up some of their subsystems to competitors, here is a feature that out of the gate is going to support third-party camera apps.
Yeah. I'd like to think that, I'm sorry, Shelly, we were about to say something.
Oh, I was just going to take another direction and say that I'm excited that it's on all the iPhones. It's not just, it's not like the action button. It's not like the dynamic island that started on the Pro phones only. It's available to everybody. And I think that will also improve adoption quite a bit. And I think this is the kind of thing that will become in the cultural zeitgeist. People will know that this is the camera control button, and they'll probably will become, jargon or words that people will associate with using their phone in this way. And that only spreads faster because it's available on all the models of the new phones.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only thing that surprised me is that they're calling it. I would have guessed slightly that they would have called it something like, remember how when they created the iPod, they didn't necessarily call it the Apple Music Player or the iMusic Player. The iPad 2, they want to make it vague so that it can fill other purposes without making it sound like it needs a rebranding. Given that they've already put visual intelligence, this is the button they put visual intelligence behind, not the right. I would have put a little bit of money on the idea that they would have called it the seek, the look button, or the capture button.
Yeah, I want one word. Camera control is lots of syllables.
Yeah, and also you're controlling a camera as opposed to getting a result from pressing this button.
And not a brand. It's more. It feels more generic than that. It's not like some whizzy magic brand. But here's my theory on that, which is they want this to be a unitasker. They really want it to always be about camera capture, even though the AI feature where you hold it up and find out what kind of dog that is which is a to come feature, but it is a camera feature. I think they wanted to go low key with the branding on this and just say, look, it's just a camera control. That's all it is. That's all it's ever going to be. If you make an RSS reader and you want to be able to swipe on it in order to scroll your stories, you can't. We're not going to let you. And for everybody who asked me, I got a lot of texts while I was down there. They were like, can you assign it to other tasks? Here's the answer. Apple doesn't talk about camera with the action button anymore. And the action button also is going to be on the iPhone 16, not just the Pro. Yeah. The action button is it does whatever you want button, but camera control is a unitasker. It's a dedicated hardware just for the camera. And I know it's a little bit weird, but I think I understand philosophically what they're trying to do there, which is to say now the iPhone literally is a camera. It has a shutter button on it, just like your camera did. And that's all it will ever be able to do. Interesting choice.
You think that maybe would it make, I'm not going to ask for predictions because who knows, but do you think it would make sense for there to be, I wouldn't call it a dual boot iPhone, but you can, the ability to lock it into the mode where it's a camera that also runs iPhone apps. If you're at Disney World and chiefly you're using it as a camera device and you're occasionally sending things to other people, and of course you occasionally want to get messages from your kids and wherever the hell they are in the park. But that's another thing that I would love any phone to be able to do, to be able to essentially say, please just lock this into the camera app. Make everything the shortest distance between a dark screen and an active camera thing.
Well, since you can use this locked, I mean, they're kind of already there in the sense that if you call this up and press, you're in camera, and then you go click, 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 and then you put it back down. You don't have to unlock it, right? You can, but you don't have to. It's an interesting point. That's what Andy, I think that's the impulse that they're going on here, right? They want to make it, because look, we've been talking for almost a half an hour about new iPhones, and we're talking about a button on it, but it's a camera button. And Apple knows, why do people buy new iPhones? The number one reason has to be the camera, because they're so important as our cameras in our lives.
And I also hear a lot of people outside of our techie space talking about wanting to get to the camera quicker. Like, that is not a thing that is just amongst us. That is a thing that I have heard anecdotally many times. And seeing that we know that in the next version, we're also going to be able to change the two buttons that are on the lock screen to access other stuff quickly. But the fact that this camera button can get people to that Snapchat camera faster, or I don't know what else other people use, their Signal camera or whatever, who knows? But
or something like Halide or
Halide, exactly,
or Obscura, exactly.
Yeah, being able to get there to the thing that they like to use and use it as the camera, I think will improve people's abilities to do that. Because I think about myself and how I don't really take a lot of photos. And I kind of, after going to a place and doing a thing, kind of looking back on it going, dang it, I wish I would have taken a couple of photos while I was there. I feel like having this physical manifestation of a reminder that, hey, you've got this great camera in your hand right now would be quite nice, and would be that reminder that I need to, why don't I just click this button and take a few photos?
Yeah, I think I've heard, and I'm sure people who are listening to this are saying it now, but you already can swipe to the right to take a photo, and you can always tap on the button on the lock screen to take a photo. And that's all true, but I will tell you, even with all of the attempts Apple has made to make it that easy, including setting the action button, by the way, to default to opening the camera, people don't do it. They just don't do it. So I think Apple's saying, all right, if we make a button that only does the camera and we put it on there and it looks pleasing and it's like, this is the camera button, people press the camera button, will people feel like they can get to the camera faster. And honestly, I think this is a mental disconnect with software on a touchscreen, as great as touchscreens are. And the iPhone exists because Apple was like, we're not going to do a BlackBerry. We're going to make it so that the software can define the interface on that touchscreen. And touchscreens are awesome. However, there is a disconnect where you're like, oh, now I got to go here and I got to do this and I got to tap on this. And this button is Apple saying, what if we built a completely different touch-based system that is not on your screen, that feels like a button, that will it make people more comfortable? And I guess we'll find out over time if it will, but I would probably bet that it will, because I think it makes more sense in our brains than, sliding around things that come and go on a touchscreen.
Yeah, I think that Apple's doing such a good job with the camera system on their iPhones. I think every other high-end phone is doing a really great job, but Apple really, really takes it to heart. They're running out of problems to solve. They're running out of bad pictures that get taken. And I think one of the big remaining challenges is, oh my God, my kid is doing something awesome. Where's my phone? Getting it from my pocket to unlocked to in the right camera mode to I know where the button is and I'm pressing the button and oh wait, no, I actually wanted video. There's still and as everybody's saying, if you know how it works, there are shortcuts. There are ways to get it live very, very quickly. As you said, Jason, you don't necessarily have to unlock it to get it to activate the camera, but that's still kind of a stumbling block. Which is why I keep thinking about the idea of what if I know that I'm just going to be taking a lot of pictures, a lot of great things are going to be happening, and I just wanted to always assume that the next thing I want to do is take a picture. If we grease the rails that way.
Yeah, I wonder if there's even something where it feels you touching that button and if you depress it a little, it just goes to camera mode, right? So maybe that. I bet.
I even bet that with machine learning, can't they just figure out that there's a motion that usually means your phone. I'm taking a picture. Maybe. Particularly when it's desperate. It's like, okay, I'm gonna change the camera settings so that if he's shaking, if there's something quick happening, I can take something of a good picture because this person has lost their mind. I've got to be the sensible person in this equation.